Hi everyone! Today's tutorial is about how to prepare the surface. And I mean, with decorative painting technique, we can paint on different types of surface. We can paint on wood, on metal, on fabric, on canvas. So we have different choices. But there are different ways to prepare the surface. I mean, there are different things we have to keep in mind according to the surface we are about to use. So let's see together how to make it. Okay, so I want to start talking about wood, probably because it's the material I use the most, so I think I have a little bit more to tell you about. Well, wood is not a really smooth surface. Actually is a little rough. I hope you can hear that it's not really smooth. And this is good because the paint adheres really nicely, but we want to be able to move our brush while we are painting, and we don't want to get stuck. So this is why we need the wood to be as smooth as possible. And to do so, we need to sand our surface first. And first thing we need to do is we have to check the direction of the wood. And in this case, the wood is going in this direction. So I would sand like so. And I'm using these sanding pads, which are really nice because they have two different sanding papers, two types of sanding paper. So on one side I have the let's say it's kind of a medium size, and on the other one it's not really the hardest one, which is good because otherwise I could scratch the wood and I don't want to do that. But this one is just a little bit harder than this one. So I start from this one here, and yeah, there's the light, so yeah, you can't see it properly, but trust me, the wood is going in this direction. So I start sanding my wood like this. And when I'm done, I sand again, but with the other side. And when you've done sanding, you'll notice that there's a lot of dust, and that's the dust that the wood makes naturally. And the only thing you need to do is that you have to clean your surface from the dust, because we want a smooth but also a clean surface, like so. And you can hear that my surface is smoother than at the beginning. Alright, so now it's the time for the multi-purpose sealer, and this is a product by Deco Art Americana. I don't know if you've ever used this product, but I use it every time I paint on wood. This is a product that was created to go inside the pores of the wood and to seal the wood, so the paint can adhere to the surface, but it also prevents the wood from absorbing too much paint or too much water. So in my opinion, sealing the wood makes it easier to float colors for shading or highlighting. So this is why I really suggest you to use it, or at least to give it a try. Alright, so once your surface is sanded and smooth, you take your sealer and you just put some on your surface. Then you take, this is an old flat brush I have, and add a little bit of water. It doesn't have to be dumped, just a little wet. And then you apply the product on your surface. Of course, you can also use a roller if you prefer, but yeah, I usually apply this product with the brush, so it makes it easier for me. And I usually let it dry naturally, but if you're in a hurry, you can also use the blow dryer. So I want to put this aside for a couple of minutes, and I'll see you when it's completely dry. Alright, so now that the surface is dry, it's not smooth anymore because all the wood grains raised up. So what you need to do is you have to sand the surface again, and in this case I use the medium sanding paper or sanding pad, and I sand again. Alright, so once the surface is completely sanded, you can feel that it's smooth again. So you have to clean it again from the dust, and then you're ready to base coat. Alright, so as I mentioned also at the beginning of the tutorial, we can paint on other materials other than wood. And this is the lid of a cookie jar, and it's made of metal. The first thing you need to do when you paint on metal is to clean the surface really well. And I usually take some rubbing alcohol and I clean the surface really well. So now this is a really smooth surface, and maybe it's the opposite of wood because it's probably even too smooth. So you need to do something so that the regular acrylic paint can adhere to the surface. So what I do is I usually take some gesso, and this is DecoArt Media Gesso, and I can use the white gesso or the black gesso according to the color that I want to use for the background. But anyhow, I just take my gesso with a big flat brush, and then I lay it down on the surface, probably a couple of times. So when the gesso is dry, the surface is not so smooth, and then I can use the traditional acrylic paint. Another thing I started to do recently is to use the chalky finish paint instead of gesso. This is always by DecoArt, and that's the Americana Decor chalky finish. And I use it when I already like the color of the paint, and I found out that this type of paint really adheres very nicely to any type of surface, even to the smoothest surface like this one. So for example, in this project, I just laid down the paint. Well, okay, this is not the color I used, but it's to give you an idea. Yeah, I laid down the paint with probably 2 or 3 coats, so that the surface was not so smooth, and then I was able to transfer my guidelines and paint with the regular acrylic paints. Another surface that we can use is canvas. Usually canvases are really easy to find at local craft stores, and usually they already have a couple of coats of gesso or thick white paint to cover the texture of the canvas. So you can also paint on canvas directly, but I usually like to apply another coat, thin coat of gesso, and I use the DecoArt Media gesso that can be black or white according to the color that I want to use for my background. And to apply the gesso, I use just an old flat brush, and I lay down the gesso like this or like this, it's the same. And then I take this kind of, I don't know if it's a palette knife or not, but anyhow, I do this to level the gesso and to remove the excess. If you don't have something like this, don't worry. You can also use old cards, like I don't know, old credit cards or grocery store cards or any other cards that you have. They work just fine. Another thing I wanted to show you is this one, because we can also use the gesso to create a texture background like I did here in this project, and this is a really nice effect in my opinion, because it kind of gives some movement to the background, and so yeah, it gives a really nice effect. And if you like this effect, there are 2 tutorials on my channel already. One is about how actually to create the texture using the gesso, and the other one is about how to put color on the gesso once it's dry. So if you're interested and if you want to give it a try, the tutorials are available already. Another material that we can paint on is fabric. Fabric that can be a pillow, a t-shirt, or a pair of jeans, or yeah, any kind of fabric. Fabric doesn't require too much of preparation. The only thing I do is I always wash my fabric first. In the washing machine is fine, but I don't use any softener, because probably it's just a personal feeling, but I have the impression that when I use softener, it's more difficult for me to base coat or to float colors, so I just don't use it. But the most important thing is that you need to iron your fabric really well before painting. So these kind of wrinkles need to disappear. And yeah, about fabric, this is about it. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that it will help you with all your future painting projects. You can find all my designs on my website, maricamorettidesigns.com, and you can also find me on social media. If you liked this tutorial and if you want to be always updated with my videos, just subscribe to the channel. And please let me know if you have any comments, or if you have any questions, or if there are other painting tutorials you would like to watch, because if I can, I'll be happy to help you. So bye for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Ciao!